Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdist Dave. Today I'm joined by Brian Cohen of so many things. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing awesome. It's great to be back here hanging out.
Well, it's always great to have you on. I mean, we just were hanging out, Tuesday night playing some Vast Grimm. But for folks that might not be familiar with you and your works, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, I do a whole lot of everything, but right now I'm most known for Vast Grimm, a sci-fi horror RPG that I'm the co-creator of. I make lots of sculptures, weird monsters. I've been kit bashing stuff for some of the spaceships using like parts from toys like Snapships toys and other models to make things for that. I'm the VP of RPG development at Infinite Black. I started out as a graphic designer way back when, so I've got all sorts of design and packaging skills. I do layout for a good chunk of the layout for the Vast Grimm stuff. And then I also, on the side before I joined Infinite Black, I also had my own company, Creature Curation, where I make RPG pins, patches, plushes, a whole fantasy world, Revelo, and all the stuff that came with that. So I do a lot of different things, but most of the stuff I do is all stuff that I want to play or be where or things that I would want if I were 13 years old.
Yeah, you're a busy dude. As always, folks, there are links down in the description that you can go check out. One of those links is to the current Kickstarter project for Vast Grimm that you can go check out. So tell us about the latest project.
Sure. So we launched on Tuesday. It's Vast Grimm Into the Oblivion. We had our first Vast Grimm project on GameFound, and we've since then fulfilled that and now created three new 48-page books that expand the lore, expand adventures, have new spaceship rules for combat, for generating spaceships. And I really just wanted to create new stuff for people to be able to utilize because the core book is light. It's very rules light. We wanted to make it, Ross and I wanted to make it so that if you got it, it would give you the ideas and the give you the just what you need to start build your own stuff and make if you're playing it at your table, it's different from what's at my table and give you the hooks to get you going. But this starts to expand on that. And we also have a mission patch program because I really like the idea of having patches for the different books. And like one of the first things that happened in our early playtesting was one of the players got vented, like pushed out an airlock by one of the other players. So we have a patch of the guy, like a guy being vented. So if your character got vented in game, you might want to wear that patch like a badge of honor on your bag or your jacket or whatnot.
Or don't vent me. I've already been vented.
Right, exactly.
um, so I feel like I've played quite a few games of Vast Grimm at this point. I did, we
Yeah.
just did a mini series on the channel here. You can find it's three arcs. We did a one shot promoting Wormfest. I played in a mini campaign that you had did. Was that 6 sessions that we did?
Yeah, I think so. So I think you've probably played in more Vast Grimm, at least that I know, like on stream or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
than anybody. Aside from me, like, but I, as the GM, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
totally.
you don't actually play. You only get to run it.
It's still playing most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a different role. No, for sure. Yeah, that's right, folks. Remember, your GM is a player at the table too.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah. So I feel like, and then I feel like there was a couple of just like loose one shots. So I probably played like a dozen games, and I think they've all been streamed. So
Right. And you wrote an adventure for the Volatile Verse as a stretch goal for the original crowdfunding campaign.
we did. So there's a YouTuber retreat coming up that I was invited to,
Hmm.
and so I'm scheduled to run some games. So I might actually run Vast Grimm. I don't know
Yes. Let me know what I can give you
yet.
to make
Yeah.
it easier, and anything that you might want to leave behind with the other YouTubers, I'd be happy to send a care package your way.
Sure. It's in April. I'll let you know the details and figure it
Awesome.
out. Yeah. So I was thinking about because I'm slated to run two games, so I figured I could run one Zoo Mafia, obviously, and then one
Yep.
run one Vast Grimm. Um, and I love the way you run the game. And we did a video that we haven't put up yet about AI dungeon masters, and I
Uh-huh.
feel like the first AI dungeon master is just like random roll charts.
Right, totally. That's, I mean, and then you have your little phrase or snippet of a sentence, and then you just kind of roll off of that and see where the adventure goes.
And so anyone who hasn't played with Brian or watched the one shots and campaigns he's run, you start off the game generally by just asking everyone to roll dice, and
Yes, most of
uh,
the time, unless I feel like unless there's something specific that I need to play test or something like that. Because for me, if I'm making it up as I go, I feel like more of a player, right? Because
okay,
you all the players are making it up as they go. So especially like in the core book, and even with all the new books that we have coming out,
yeah.
we have new tables in there to help generate adventures or come up with ideas. So it'd be like, Dave, roll a d12, Ted, roll a d8, Robin, roll a d10, and going through and pulling things out of that, writing it down on an index card or whatever, and then using those and seeing how they would work into an adventure and seeing where you all take it.
How long have you been running games that way?
Let's see. I think like I mean, I've never really I've never really run pre-written modules except for in high school when we had like the ruins of Undermountain, right?
Okay.
And I had the big like Waterdeep map.
Oh yeah,
Like
that
it
was a
was
big
like
purple
all
box set, right?
right. And like the Waterdeep map, I had like push pinned like all the different pieces of the map up on my wall. And because I lived in like two rooms in a basement that
Uh-huh.
connected. So we had that on one wall. We put like a ping pong table up. So there'd be some people in the room and some people in the other room. So I'd be like yelling through as the GM. So not since high school have I like run something that was kind of pre-packaged, right? So ever since then, I've always kind of gone off the cuff for the most part because I just enjoy it so much more.
Do you have tips for GMs that want to run that way?
Um, Lean into what the players are saying, right? Like if you say something, listen to it and then take that and add to it because it helps if you're not the only one kind of guiding where things are going. And if you do that, it also, even if the players don't realize it, it makes them feel like it's important to their character and to what they're doing because you're kind of the story's building based on their actions and the things that they want to do. I do that almost every week when I run a kids game. It's like I'll ask the players like what do they hear, what do they smell, or something like that, and then I take that. It may not be immediately in the room that they're in. It could be an hour later in the game, but it's bringing it back and trying to make sure that you incorporate what what the players are thinking, even if they don't realize it.
Yeah. So much like yourself, we really always do homebrew and make stuff up. But I would say like early on, like I started off as like a very heavy prep GM, and like I would
Mm-hmm.
write my own like flavor text and like pages and pages of notes. And I think like there's a combination of things that happen to kind of for me to make that shift where I don't really write, I don't really do that much prep before games anymore. And it was like a combination of like running your from your notes, and by the end of the session you've used like a quarter of them or less,
Right.
and or the players have done something to make everything you've written kind of a moot point.
Mm-hmm.
And also like just having a week where you're just super busy, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, either I have to game without anything ready, or we don't game this weekend.
Right.
And like, I just want a game, so I was supposed to see how it goes. And then that session turns out okay, or it may be even really good, and they're like, why am I spending all those hours writing notes?
I also find like when I'm doing that and I have something written,
Yeah,
I find that I stumble more, right? Because I'm then feeling like I have to reference this and
yeah,
see what it is. And then there's bigger pauses and lulls in it. It takes people out of the game faster than if I'm just, making it up as I go. We used to have a great group in of my Atlanta friends, and one of them my friend Chris would take notes like tons and tons of notes because I'd be making stuff up so much on the fly that
yeah.
like the next day I wouldn't remember anything that happened in the game because I was like just trying to
Keep
come
up with
up
the
with it. So
players.
right, exactly.
Oh yeah, so that is one of the issues. So I would say for anyone that wants to run games off the cuff, it's not that you don't do prep. I just feel like the prep happens differently, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like during this session that you're running off the cuff, ideally you're taking a bunch of notes as you play, and that becomes like the prep for your next session.
Right. Yeah, totally. And you may have some things like a big bad or something,
Yeah.
or underlying themes of what may happen going on, but know that you've got to be able to shift them and adapt them based on what the players are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like the early days of gaming and like trying to shoehorn the players into a plot or storyline that they could give a rat's ass about, you know?
Right.
And
And that's not fun for anybody.
no, no, it's more work and a pain in the ass and frustrating for you as the GM and the play and the players. Sometimes they just don't understand what you're trying to get them to do, right? So it's like
Right.
it just becomes frustrating for them as well. Like they don't know that they're messing up, you know, your plot or your storyline. I feel like most players don't set out to do that. Occasionally,
No.
jerk off,
Well,
but for the most part, you know, it's just something that happens. But like when you shift to like running off the cuff and focusing on what they're doing, it becomes so much easier.
right. There's no plot or storyline to be ruined at that point, right?
Yeah, it's
There's
whatever they make as the game goes on.
Yep.
So, what do you what do you find the differences between running a sci-fi game and running a fantasy game?
So for me, I run my sci-fi games very science fantasy because I'm not very science minded,
Yeah,
right? Like all the stuff that makes things work doesn't you really always compute in my brain. So I tend to lean more into the fantasy side of sci-fi. But the thing that I enjoy about it is that because there's so many different planets and places things can be, it it's everything's new and everything it's like the players they're discovering it for the first time just like their characters might be, whereas a lot of times in like really refined fantasy settings all the lore has been told. It's been passed down from generation to generation as bards sit around a fire and are at the tavern. They know the stories of these dragons and these things, but you're flying out in space and all of a sudden some weird thing pops out of like this weird black hole and you don't know what it is. You don't know, your characters don't know, and it makes it more of a discoverable experience for everybody.
I think running like spacefaring games can be intimidating for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like when all of a sudden, right, you're worried about, you know, are the players going to go into this town, into the mountains, or into the forest? You're now like, which solar system are they going to head towards next?
But I mean, that's part of the excitement, and that's part of, you know, you can twist and turn it any way you want to and any way that the players feel like it's going, right?
Yeah.
um, and being able to play twist it based on like how the players are playing their characters and things like that can definitely work and make it shine more for them.
What have you guys thought about doing any like planet generators, or have you done any planet generators?
You know, in the first crowdfunding, we had talked about that as one of the stretch goals.
Yeah.
That's not something that has come up yet, but as we keep going higher and higher on this Kickstarter, that may be something that we should work on. So I'm going to write that down just so I don't forget.
I mean, it'd be kind of cool for the players to have to land someplace and then one of them gets eaten by a T Rex. Just saying.
Totally, absolutely. And I mean, and because this is rules light, like
Yeah.
all the Morkborg stuff is compatible with it, like the Pirate Borg stuff is compatible with it, the Cyborg, all that stuff. You could have somebody land on any one of these types of planets and you can make it whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
So I love that idea. I love there was a small zine like inside a T-Rex that was Morkborg compatible. You could totally do something with that.
So, do you know of anybody that's kind of mixing and matching these, you know, Morkborg and its offshoots?
In like the Infinite Black Discord, there's been a handful of people that talk about that and how they mash up all the different things. Because there's like one of the things that Cyborg did that I love that I wish we would have done is they added another stat, which is like a technology stat,
Yeah.
which, you know, being able to incorporate that in would probably maybe in Vast Grimm 2.0 or something, we'll do something along those lines.
Or
But
expansion, maybe an expansion where you just add one. You can add the one
right,
stat.
exactly.
Um,
So
yeah, because I guess you know it's the same problem for D&D is like dexterity is the super stat. So
right,
like you guys kind of have a super stat with presence.
right, exactly. I mean, that's what I call for the majority of the time
Yeah.
when calling for roles.
So there's three books. What you mentioned some of the things like you mentioned more spacecraft rules and starship rules, but what else is in there?
So okay, so I'll go through the three books. So the first one that I started working on is called Blood Altered. And the idea is like you've played enough to know that like in the lore there's this mausoleum of Bay where the parasites first came out and that's how the worms infected the universe and how that like how most of humanity's now gone. Well, this book is set on that planetoid K2116b where that mausoleum is. There are many like devout people that believe that the worms are what's supposed to happen, that the universe is supposed to get annihilated. So they pilgrimage here and they end up dying because the atmosphere is not good for humans and it quickly deteriorates their quality of life. But there's an adventure set inside the mausoleum. There's also there's like four different adventures set on this planetoid with different adventure hooks, subclasses of the devout, that religious sect, and new creatures within that. So that's one of the books. It's kind of a that's more of kind of like a campaign style book.
Okay.
um and that one was one because when first talking about ideas about places that should be explored more like from our side, we thought that was an important one because we do have the third party license where anybody can create Vast Grimm stuff and make money and publish whatever they want as long as it's not racist or homophobic or anything like that. Um,
Oh,
but
there's a morality clause.
yes, yes, if you're gonna publish Vast Grimm stuff, we don't want any hate. Um,
Yeah.
so
I will say I am not a fan of morality clauses. In principle, or ideal, I like what they represent.
mhm,
But the problem with anything like that, I'm kind of like a free speech absolutist. My problem with
sure,
anything like that is it's like who's arbitrating, you know, what's acceptable and what's not. And on a small scale, it's probably fine. Like right now, it's just a dude, right?
right.
And you're a good dude. But what happens if someone else buys Vast Grimm and they're not a good dude? And they're like, you know what? I don't like this person. So clearly, what they're saying is hate speech or whatever.
Gotcha. Sure. Well, if they publish it, and I guess
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it would be me and Infinite Black and Ross that say whether or not
Yeah.
it violates that. So, I'm a good dude. So if I see it as being shitty, it's like, no, take it down. So I get that as well, and it's because that especially as things are different in different like as time progresses and things like that and
Yeah.
cultural shifts occur, it's all a lot of that can be perspective based, but I mean the baseline of that stuff is it's pretty obvious if somebody's writing hate speech or not,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, there's a good case for like, because I mean, Wizards they put a morality clause in, right?
Right.
And one part of it is anything that's illegal.
Hmm.
Well, illegal where? Right? Like you could
But
pick which,
sure.
yeah, right? Like, homosexuality is illegal in certain countries, right? And
Right.
someone could weaponize that if they wanted to, or even in our country, right? In some states, it's legal to partake in marijuana, and other states, it's not.
Right. Yep.
So if you write about marijuana use, where does that fall? It falls wherever they want it to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can't imagine putting a legally thing in a clause in there because our book is filled with all sorts of weird space drugs and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. I've sidetracked you, but go ahead.
So the next book is Space Raiders, and it's all about like we have the core class. We have 8 classes in the Vast Grimm core book, but in the back of it, in like right before the back or part of the back adventure, there's already space raiders as enemies. A quick chart to be able to make those. So I wanted to expand on that and build those into playable classes.
Yeah.
So in that book, we expand those, and then also went ahead and started creating factions of space raiders that that have they've kind of control different sects of the universe. And that's something that's in the book. You roll the GM rolls or the players roll to figure out who controls what area. So in your universe that you play at your table, it may be different than my universe. And then at the back, there's a big hex crawl adventure because one of the factions there's an adventure around their area that they control that's known as the graveyard, which is where a bunch of derelict spaceships are. And that's another one where it's randomly generated where the spaceships are within the hex grid, and then where the kind of the goal of the main goal of the adventure is within the graveyard. And that one's fun because there's lots of weird nods to various B movies, punk songs, and things like that, all riddled throughout that book. There's lots of things that just make me smile while I was writing it. So I'm digging on that one.
I was
And then we've got
instantly thinking like Reaver vibes.
yeah, there's definitely some of that with some of it, and then there's there's some Killer Clowns vibes. There's some stuff. There's some nods to some of the stuff I've written before, like
Did you make
a couple
Space
of the
Juggalos?
no, more like the 1980s B movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Yeah. But and then there's some of the factions are named after species in my fantasy setting.
Nice.
Like they're just little nods for people that have been following. Yeah. And then we've got the Space Cruisers book, which I think is probably going to be the most utilized book because it's very much set up like the character generation within the core book, or where we've got 6 classes. Each of the classes has different types of ships.
Yeah.
The ships, depending on the class, have numbers of mod slots available. And then it has rules for space combat, magic on like using tributes like space starship tributes that are different than the magical tributes that player can use, and then it's also got a few locations thrown in there as well, new locations that haven't been described other places.
Will there be a app for the ships?
An app for the ships, like
yeah, because
phone app.
You have a random generator.
Oh yes, totally. That was one of the stretch goals we've already unlocked. The Starship generator. It'll be very similar. It's not going to pop up a map, but it'll pop up because we've created new stats for the ships that are different than the player stats, but it has a very similar mechanic feel to, like, if you know how to play Morkborg or Vast Grimm or any of those, you'll know how to use the ship. So yeah, it's going to generate the same way. So I haven't built it yet, but I'll be building that sometime after the Kickstarter ends.
So we have a book with space cruisers and spaceships in it now. Is there ship to ship combat rules in there?
There are ship to ship combat rules in there. I was very much inspired by Pirate Borg ship to ship combat.
Okay.
Depending on the ship, the different types of ships have a different number of crew that they need to be able to fly.
Right.
And then one person's the pilot and they move it. One person defends if you have defenses, or to defend against incoming stuff. And then depending on the different mod slots that the ship has, like you may have a gun, you may have a giant buzzsaw on the front of the ship. You may have like all sorts of weird stuff that, because this is kind of very gonzo in theme. The different characters would then take on the roles of the different mod slots or things that the ship can do.
So when creating the ship to ship combat rules and just ship rules in general, how much time and thought did you put into making sure like everybody can do stuff? Like one of the problems I've seen in the past with any kind of game that incorporates combat like this, it's like, okay, you have someone that's really good at doing this thing, like say flying the ship, but if there's no ship, then a good part of their character is kind of not useful, or the opposite. Like if you guys are flying ships all the time, you've got people that just aren't very effective or useful.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I think works with this because of that is that it's super light and
Yeah.
fast. Just like combat in the core game, ship combat's not going to take a whole lot of time. So if you want a highly like super detailed ship to ship combat system, this is not it. This is meant to be fast, fun, and like really get in there. And depending, most likely your ship is probably going to have probably 3 or 4 things that it can do at
Right.
minimum. And so if you have a party of 4 or 5 people, if one of those people is piloting and one person is defending, then that leaves the other one. So there's usually something that everyone can do during that combat scenario.
Cool. It's definitely one of the challenges of creating that kind of system,
Right.
and like I feel like in the early days, like as a designer, you're thinking about how the ship works instead of like, oh, well, how does the group dynamic work to make this a fun game?
Right. Yeah. And part of that is making it not super drug out
Yeah.
so that takes like, I don't want to play space combat for 2 hours. I want to be flying. Oh, here's a scenario. Okay, now we get to this next place or whatever that's going to happen, or this next RP session or something that occurs.
So it seems like you got 3 books, and they each have like 2 functions essentially. One
Mm-hmm.
being like an adventure, and then the other being additional, kind of like adding rules to the game. So the first one, you have the Mausoleum adventure, and it sounds like a bestiary as well.
Yeah, yeah. That one's got like 4 interconnecting adventures in it,
Okay.
and some subclasses. The next one has a bunch of classes and an adventure, a hex crawl adventure. The Starship one is more just rules and flavor, and then it doesn't have an adventure in it, but it has like a gas and sip type location and a repair location, like things that
Yeah.
will service the ships if you go and find them around the universe.
So which one was the most fun to work on?
I think the most fun to write was the Space Raiders.
Okay.
The most exciting to work on was the space cruisers, only because that was the one I was most afraid of. Like that was the
Okay.
one I was worried about screwing up. And
Oh
then,
yeah, I definitely remember you talking like early on when I asked about that. You're like, well, we have a third-party license.
yeah, anybody can make those. I don't need to make those space rules. But when I played, well, I played Pirate Borg, and then I read the naval combat rules that Luke did in that. I was like, yeah, this doesn't have to be complicated. This like but it needs to be done because people are going to want it, and I want it now that we're playing more and where people are going ship to ship, and I want to be able to have charts and tables where if you come across a ship in space, here's some more things that it could be. And I wanted to be able to also describe like, okay, we have all these different classes of ships and things to make it a little more universal for everybody that's playing.
So you've kind of described it as being science fantasy, but I think it's still science fiction. It's just very rules light and very light touch on the science part of it, right?
Right. And especially in our games or the games
Yeah.
that you've played with me, because I go a little lighter on the science side.
So I don't feel like it really crosses into science fantasy. It's just like science light, right? It's like
Sure.
for me, like I guess the pinnacle for science fantasy is going to be Star Wars, right? They fight with swords, they use magic. Uh,
Right. Well, I mean, we got the tributes that are magic, and
yeah,
so there's little bits of that.
yeah. I see him. I guess because when I play, like I just attribute the tributes to uh, being just technology that's way beyond
Sure.
anything that like we understand.
Uh-huh.
So my brain is converted from magic to technology anyway. So have in the adventure with the mausoleum? Do you hint to where the worms come from at all?
No. No, that's still untapped territory.
Yeah. Now, is that something you want to do? Is that something you've already thought out, or is it something you're intentionally leaving vague?
There are so many it's currently vague on purpose because like I like having enough to to allow ideas to come later, whether they're from me and Ross or from somebody completely different. Like I don't I don't want to define everything, because then it's like, oh no, you can't do that. And I don't ever want to hinder somebody else's creativity.
That makes sense. I feel like Ebron, Keith Baker did a lot of
Yep.
that. Especially like the day of mourning, where it's like, maybe he had an idea what happened, or maybe he never bothered to just let
Hmm.
everyone, imagine the worst thing they could possibly imagine.
Yep, exactly.
So, we Tuesday nights we do a stream game, and we rotate the GMs. So next up is Ted, and he's going to be running some Zoo Mafia. But we have a new player that's joined the group, and in his turn, he might be running Vast Grimm. I'm kind of nudging him in that direction. I'm like
Uh-huh.
always trying to nudge people in directions of not D&D and other games, just because I guess I play a lot of D&D anyway.
Right.
So I'm
Sure.
just like, I'd rather just do something else. And I'm hoping that he does run Vast Grimm, and he's got kind of an interesting idea because he wants to run it from
Before times.
at the very beginning of
Right.
when the worms are released.
Hmm. And so that's like 663 years
Yeah,
before like the book. So that's, that could be anything. That could be however, I mean, at that point, I would imagine the universe is filled with humans like all over the
everything's
place.
bright and shiny and
Right,
hopeful.
exactly. Yes. Nothing could ever go wrong.
Yeah, it's like buying a new used car, and it looks amazing. It's been all detailed until you get it
Yep.
up on the lift and you see all the rust underneath.
And until the transmission falls out in Virginia.
Yeah. Oh, that might be your fault for Vast Grimming your van.
That's right. I made it too grim.
You made it too grim. Um, you ever going to explore the gate?
The Gate of Infinite Stars?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a couple of games that I've run, people have gotten pieces of it. And that is something that I kind of like the idea of, like as the base of people that play grows
Yeah.
and more folks are into it. I mean, I can already see that there's a lot of new people that are coming into the current Kickstarter. So I think as it grows, I think that may be something that we want to explore as a long form campaign.
What is the Gate of Infinite Stars?
It's a rumor like that there's some sort of engineers or scientists out there that are building pieces that once all these pieces are put together, it'll create a portal to another dimension, another universe, some way to get out of this dying universe that is being infested by the worms and being overtaken by they. So some people believe it's real, some people don't, but I could see a full long form campaign story being written around that.
Oh, that would be amazing. And then they get there, and like either they bring the worms with them or they're just
Right.
already there. And you're like,
Exactly. Yeah.
no.
Whenever I run games and I have people like or NPCs or creatures coming in from other dimensions or other universes, the places they came in from are just as shitty.
Yeah, I,
Like
I've
something just
noticed.
as bad is happening. Yeah.
I won't give any spoilers unless anyone wants, in case people want to go back and watch the live play on the channel here. But
Hmm.
there was definitely interesting variation on the Grim at the end.
Yes. Yes. I don't know if that'll ever come into like be published or anything like that, but that was just kind of seeing where the adventure went.
Yeah. Well, no, it was definitely fun, and you did some weird things, and also I think we kind of went some into maybe another dimension. I'm not entirely sure about that part yet.
I don't know. I actually do know, but I'm not going to say because your Legion may come back at some point
Yeah,
and play again.
it's a possibility. So Russell says they get there, and it's the Worms home universe. They're everywhere.
Yes, and the worms are just kind of like bipedal, almost walking around doing like normal 9 to 5 jobs.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe the humans can infect them then. Turn the tables.
Yes.
So The Kickstarter is well on its way and doing really well. It could actually match your original crowdfunding project.
I know, which is crazy because like on that one we had a bunch of Elder Dice as well.
Yeah.
So with this primarily being books, we do have the patch program,
Yep.
but I love seeing that we're actually pretty close, I think, to the original backer count, the final backer count that was on GameFound for the first project, and we still have 21 days to go. So I'm excited about this, and I'm excited that there's going to be so many more people playing this at their tables.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like, and I completely forgot how much the infinite black dice were tied into the first campaign. So I was like, well, I guess it's doing well, and the numbers are higher because there's 4 books technically if someone buys in for the first time. But I forgot like how much the dice could jack up the price of a pledge, in comparison to the books. And there's a lot of sweet dice that you can get.
Yeah.
These were on fire for me the other night, which is not something that happens very often.
I know.
So,
and I love how those grimoires turned out with the holographic printing on them, printed on the holographic material. So pretty.
They came out really, really well for sure.
Thank you.
Although I will say, even though my dice were on fire, I seemed to be draining the luck from the rest of the virtual table.
Yeah, you were.
Theirs were not.
Steven was rolling horribly, like how I normally roll. It was nice.
Yeah.
It was good to see a bunch of fumbles happening.
Well, I would say as I normally roll, but
Yeah, true.
I mean, I believe the first mini series you ran that I was involved in, I think I destroyed our ship in the first session.
Yep, pretty sure. You're like, I'm gonna corkscrew this.
Yes.
Yep.
That game and those players were a ton of fun.
Yeah,
Also had a nice surprise twist ending as well that I don't think Brian had anything to do with.
No, I didn't.
So how do you like running for streams as opposed to just running at a table?
So I like running streams if I don't have to deal with the technical side of things.
Yeah.
Because I always have problems with my Mac and trying to run games. I definitely prefer to run games in person at a table. Just something about playing off of everybody's energy when you're in the same room is, I know that sounds weird, but it's like I can pick up on cues a little bit better, right? And you don't have the distraction of a screen or a chat or anything like that. You're more in it, like together, I think. So
yeah, no,
I prefer
that. Completely makes sense to me.
But
go ahead.
But I'd rather play like this if that's my option.
Yeah.
I'd rather do this than not play.
Yeah, I also they just serve different purposes too, kind of. One live events are always better than seeing a recording of it or seeing the produced version of whatever the thing is. There's just a certain energy that comes from getting a bunch of humans together in one spot. And the more people involved, the more energy. That's why I feel like live events are so exciting, whether you're talking about circus performances or seeing a band live.
Right.
But I guess the difference between playing a game and streaming a game is we get to share these games with other people that wouldn't normally be spectating.
True. Yeah. I need to get to the next level where we're playing a game at a convention in front of people.
Yeah, there you go. That's the culmination of the marriage of both of them. Yeah. I've done it a couple times. And I think when we did we did a live game for Save or Dice, and that had a decent crowd for it. But that was like with Jacob Buds and Guy Schlanders and Cody from Taking 20. So, and it was Gen Con.
Yep.
But other than that, unless you're like Critical Role, it's really hard to draw that kind of audience.
Totally.
And it seems like everybody with a D20 and a computer is streaming nowadays.
Well, I mean, unless you're me, it's not that hard to actually get it set up and going, right?
Yeah. Well, I blame Steve Jobs. It's not your fault.
Fair enough. Yep.
But nothing likes to play nice with Apple or whatever it is.
No, no, the audio sure doesn't.
Yeah, we the struggle is real. So the game that we were playing, we
Mhm.
used a VTT, a different VTT, one that I haven't used before.
Yes, we were using Roll, which is a I before even getting on their platform, I saw them on Kickstarter a few years ago, and I
Mm.
backed their Kickstarter because it's a very video and audio focused interaction. So they have VTT aspects, but it was really more about having more of a like actual conversation or being making it closer to being together at a table than other VTTs. Like some you're real tiny down in the
Mm.
corner and can barely see each other. And I want to actually, see people's smiles. I want to see people's reactions while I'm running the game. And so as Roll continued to grow, and I saw that they were starting to do specific, like they were starting to put content on their platform. You could create your own sheets, style your own sheets to have character sheets that were specific to your game. You could have different things like that. So I just reached out and said, "Hey, I've got Vast Grimm that I'm working on, and I'm going to start running my own games on here to see what it's like." And eventually, that relationship grew, and we were the I think we were the first non uh, the game that wasn't specified on their Kickstarter to be
Yeah,
published on their site. So like you can go and you can buy the PDF of Vast Grimm through them, and it's in your library. You can buy some of the assets and stuff, but it's got maps and tokens and things like that. It's not as robust as some other places that have like fog of war and things like that.
yeah,
But it's the user experience is so easy. Like it's designed so well that like I don't struggle with trying to figure out where things are, how the character sheets are organized with like their own tables of contents and things like that. I really like it, and they're going to be our digital fulfillment partner for this Kickstarter. So like you back it and you get PDFs and things like that. Afterwards, you'll get an email from them to go and be able to download the content. You'll have it in your Roll app, like if you're logged in and running
yeah,
games, but you'll also be able to download it directly to your machine.
yeah. VTTs is hard. Like there's so many of them at this point, and they
Right.
all do like slightly different things. Like we had played with Fantasy Grounds for a while, and like you and I'm not very techy, as you probably already know at this point. And like you used to have to do something with your router because
Uh
for
huh.
whatever reason that particular the way that particular VTT worked, in order to get it going, and then like Roll 20 has its own issues. Like my favorite thing
Hmm.
about Roll 20 when we play D&D over there is its integration with
Uh
D&D
huh.
Beyond, so I don't actually have to use the Roll 20 features,
Uh huh.
and I can just use the integrations. Like even our games are super low tech. Like we use the VTT this time because you're like, hey, can we do this? And I'm like, we checked it out.
Sure.
I'm like, oh yeah, we can definitely do this. This is easy enough. And like you said, it's the interface is very user friendly. But most of our games, we just literally just use Zoom and Theater of the Mind for everything.
Right. And that's like I do almost like since most of the games I run are off the cuff,
Yeah.
there's no point in me having stuff set up and like and waiting. So that's part of one of the things that attracted me to Roll so much anyway, because if I need to have an image of somebody in here, I can have a photo and have it show the table or whatever. If I need something, it's easy to do. But most of the time, it's just us sitting around playing make believe without anything else and just using our imagination.
And that's in person as well.
No, I don't use that in person. Oh, in person, like sitting at a table.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't break out maps most of the time. Sometimes we'll have like a dry erase grid
Yeah,
for
yeah.
like combat and stuff like that, but it's not like setting up this scenario and setting this up and big reveal or anything because I don't know where the players are going to take stuff.
The worst is like me and Ted play in a bunch of different groups, and we
Hmm.
switch DMs for the groups. So switching with Ted is terrible because all of his players are used to like scatter and terrain and
Uh
custom
huh.
minis, and I'm like, well,
Yep.
guys, the honeymoon is over because I don't do any of that.
Uh huh. Use your
That
imagination.
that's right. We're gonna use our imaginations, and even then, those bastards, they like I'll start describing something, and they're like roll, we'll roll initiative. Next thing you know, they're pulling out the minis and terrain and setting it up.
It's like, but no, it's going to look like this. And how big is the room?
Yeah, yeah,
Click, 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 click.
yeah,
Yep.
for sure. Uh, and you know, so I guess Ted does a little bit more prep because he's got his like centerpieces that he wants to use or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's cool and all, but it's just not my jam.
Yep. And sometimes like I've run a couple of games at conventions where it has to, I need a little more of that
Yeah.
because you're on kind of time constraints. You have people set up for a certain amount of time. So having a little bit of that pre-planned helps.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
Running one shots and running convention games, they need to be linear in design. Open
Hmm.
endedness is the worst. Like one of my favorite stories from one of our fan games is when Ted ran one for the
Hmm.
fans, and he let them start in town instead of like starting right with the adventure, and they wanted to go shopping and do a whole shopping thing. He's like,
Uh-huh.
guys, you're 10th level, and I said just get whatever you want to start the game. Like
Yep.
they never got to the adventure, and like they finally get to like where the adventure is happening, and they go like somewhere else, and like it's a
Yep.
one shot where the adventure never actually happened.
Yep. I could see that easily happening, especially with the kids group that I run. Oh, speaking of convention, running games at conventions,
Yeah.
we've partnered with Gehenna Gaming. They're going to run Vast Grimm at PAX East
Oh,
and see how
nice.
that goes. And hopefully we'll be able to use them at a bunch of other conventions moving forward. So we'll have games running all over the place.
Yeah. So I've heard like sometimes like RPG stuff does really good at those kinds of conventions because there's not much of it there.
Right?
So yeah, so they're kind of hungry for it. Like I heard Dragon Con's actually really good for it, even though it's more of a pop culture con than a gaming con.
I've heard like I've never out of all the years that I've gone to Dragon Con, I've never gone into the gaming room. Like
Oh
where
yeah,
like the one building where the gaming stuff is in. And I've heard really, really good things. Um the, let's see, Brian, what's the module supplement you're making called? Um oh, it's Vast Grimm into Oblivion. There's three modules: Blood Altered, Space Raiders, and Space Cruisers.
yeah. So next game, which VTT are you associated with? And again, like I think they're all great and they all have great functions. It's just like
Yep.
I'm just old, right? Like the first time I actually played in a game where someone was using a VTT, he was like one of the super early streamers over on Twitch. TV
Hmm.
Timmy was his channel, and like he kind of like predated most of the other ones that people were familiar with. And when I saw him him run using a VTT, and I don't know if he used Sirenscape or if he used one of the other ones or his own things. To me, it was like watching a conductor with an orchestra making all these moving pieces,
Uh-huh.
work. You doing sound effects, um, throughout the game, and visual effects. Like if you cast a fireball and stuff, I'm like, that is like my brain doesn't have that many compartments in order to do all that.
Right. You've got to focus on running the game and all that other stuff. That's too hard to do, right? That's one of the things I couldn't do all that at one time.
Yeah. Well, Knox, if you want to come on and talk about it, you just reach out to us and let me know. Um, yeah. So yeah. In that regards, I am just kind of an old grognard when it comes to gaming, and I just like theater of the mind more than anything. Like
Hmm.
even when we originally started moving away from theater of the mind, it was
Hmm.
like we would just use whatever we had laying around to just make a general map, and we would just use dice
Uh-huh.
for our for a character. So that we would use D4s for players and D6s for monsters. And literally, the main reason we started doing that is because one of the GMs we would play with was kind of a dick, and he'd be like, "The ogre is going to attack the mage," and we're like, "How is he attacking the mage? The mage is behind everybody else." So
Nice.
we did it more out of necessity than any
Hmm.
like great tactical desire to see this all play out. But that's how it started, and we upgraded from random whatever we had to Kit Kat walls. When there was a Halloween where we didn't get any trick or treaters, so we had all these mini Kit Kats left over, and so we
Hmm.
just started using them to build the dungeons with and our rooms with. And
Nice.
every once in a while, you get a new player, and they're like, "Oh, Kit Kat! I like Kit Kat. Can I
And you're like
have one?"
smack.
We're like, "No, no." We're like, "It's okay," because they were from like Halloween 3 years ago. So it was kind of like a mean hazing. If anything,
Nice.
you just they would take a bite and you just see their face.
How many Kit Kat breaks high is this wall?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So but now Ted has a plastic addiction. So we had a new
Yes.
we had someone come back to our group that hasn't played with us for a while, and they're just looking at all the minis Ted has. It's like, I mean, with doing Nerd Arcade, we get sent a bunch of stuff, but also he's
Sure.
back like every bones. So
Yep. And just one bones alone comes with so much stuff.
yeah, yeah, like it. I don't think any of those people that have backed bones, whatever they're up to 99 or whatever, they probably are still painting the ones from the first one they backed.
I still have a ton. Well, I'm terrible at actually getting around to painting them, but I have a ton from the first one that are in my son's closet right now. It's like, nope, they're moving away from where my stuff is. I like that. Break me off a piece of that castle wall.
Yeah, yeah. And then you realize the castle wall is 5 years old, and it's like
And it breaks a tooth as you go in to bite it.
that, or it's like biting into sawdust.
Delicious.
Have you ever seen someone when they make that face when they bite into something really bad? It's like where their mouth just drops because they
Uh-huh.
don't know what to do. Yeah, I mean we're less jerks nowadays, so we probably wouldn't do that to a new player now.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
that was back in like the '90s and '80s when we're terrible. We're terrible. Everybody was terrible though, so I guess it wasn't as bad.
Yeah, you get older.
Enlightened, we
You
get
don't
more
want to be mean to
enlightened.
your friends anymore.
So, have you gotten to play Vast Grimm as a player yet?
I've been told I played once, but my memory sucks so bad.
Hmm.
I can't recall when it was.
Uh,
So I don't think so.
they're
I think they might have been wrong, but yeah,
gaslighting
no,
you.
yeah. I've ran a bunch of it.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've played, but I've never actually. I don't think I've actually had like a real character that I've generated that I've played.
What is the largest table you've run Vast Grimm for?
I think it was six. Like, but I haven't been asked to run a really big one. I'm sure we
Yeah.
could, but the days of running 13 people at a table are well behind me. I'd much rather have five. I'd like five, 4 or 5 is the ideal player group for me.
Yeah, I think my range is 4 to 6 is
Hmm.
decent. We did 7 in our like first D&D campaign for 5e for a while. I think that one actually might have went up to 9. That was a pretty big table.
And that's easier in person.
Yeah.
It's much harder online because it's easier to cut other people off and talk over people. So I find like the 4 to 5 is better for video, but in person six is pretty manageable.
But I feel like back in like the AD&D days, we've
Hmm.
definitely ran a couple tables that were like 14.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like the dining room table with all the leaves in it.
Uh-huh. Yep. I had a waiting list, like people were waiting in high school for somebody to die so they could get in because the group was just too big. I couldn't let more people in because it was just we weren't going nothing was getting accomplished even in these 8 hour sessions that we were playing like on the weekend and stuff.
That becomes the tricky part is like not wanting to say no to new players.
Right. Yeah.
But
But not having it's tough, right?
yeah, at a certain point, it's like, all right, someone else has got a GM, so you just break these tables up.
Yeah, that would be nice. But I don't know. I like well, you would still have the responsibility of GMing. So I really enjoy running games almost more than playing games.
Interesting. I find I like doing whichever one I'm not doing at the time. When I'm playing, I want to run, and when I run, I want to play.
Yep.
So it's a curse.
Ooh, I see numbers moving on the Kickstarter. We're
Big
real
size.
close to that 99.
AD&D made it easy to have more players because each player had to take time calculating factors.
Yep.
That might be true. Also, AD&D was so weird in the sense, like in hindsight, looking back, that it was fairly rules light compared to modern RPGs. It's just that the
Hmm.
rules it had just were overly complex.
Yep.
So it kind of made up for it. So when is Into the Oblivion expected to deliver?
We have a delivery date of September. So I'm hoping that we come in under that, but that's like ideally we'd have shipped to everybody and have it in time for Gen Con. Because
Okay.
Infinite Black has a much bigger booth at Gen Con this year. If all goes well with my van, the Vast Grimm mobile is going to be parked inside the booth. Um,
Oh wow, that's freaking
yeah.
awesome! Awesome
So
storage.
yeah,
Woohoo!
right, exactly. And then maybe in 2024, I'll put money into it and tricked it out so that we could actually play games inside of the van. But that's phase two,
That sounds shady as hell. That
right?
sounds like
Come
something I
into
was
my
warned
van and
about.
play a role playing game.
That sounds like something I was warned about as a kid.
Yes. Who's the weird old man with the pink hat?
So
Why does
when
he
you
keep
set up
asking me to
booths
play?
at Gen Con, you can drive in.
At a lot of the conventions, you can do that. You just have to kind of prearrange it ahead of time.
Okay.
Um, and so like had I more space at PAX, like
Mm,
that was one of the best experiences at PAX Unplugged. You could actually drive in and unload.
yeah.
That was fantastic. Like, but ideally, like next year, if I can get a 10 by 20, pull in, just have that as the big back wall, have the storage in there. That's going to be the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. That is kind of cool. Um, and I don't think there's. I don't. Did you ask if you're allowed to do it? Like, did you have to check into it?
Yeah, I asked Gen Con, I was like, can vehicles be part of the display? And I sent photos of the van because it's
Yeah.
completely wrapped and it's
Yep.
completely on brand. Um, and they were like, yeah, we just need to have enough space and clear it ahead of time. So
I haven't seen anyone else do that yet, so
right.
you'd be the first.
I've seen some like back in my former life, I did the graphic design stuff I did.
Yeah.
We did a lot of work for the Georgia World Congress Center and the Georgia Dome, like for the food stalls that were in there. And so I'd go to a lot of the trade shows that were going on to install stuff or deliver stuff. And during some of like the surf shows and skate shows and stuff like
Hmm.
that, they'd have massive like 2-story buildings built out. I'd see vans in there with like surfboards on attached to the top of them.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of, and like Gen Con a couple of years ago, there was like the front end of a big rig truck because they were debuting like the Big Trouble Little China like
Okay.
card
Yeah.
game by. So like if it fits in with like the props, I think that's usually how it is. It's not just like somebody parking their minivan in there.
No, no, yeah, for sure. But I'm sure there's other things that are themed. I just haven't seen it at RPG Con yet. That's all.
Yeah.
So Knox Game Dev wants to know any pictures of it online.
Yes. If you may have to scroll through a lot because I've been trying to push this Kickstarter a good bit. On my Twitter, the Brian Colin, that's Colin. You should be able to find it there. I just took it down from my Facebook header because I put up one of the promoting the Kickstarter. But
Yeah.
I think you should be able to see it and see me like standing in front of it like I'm tough or something.
Yeah. It was funny because we did find the van in the wild by accident
Yep. I
at
tried
PAX
parking
Unplugged.
it close, right, to the
Yeah.
convention center.
No, it was a pretty good spot because walking to and from the convention center from that direction, it
Hmm.
stood right out.
Yep.
Yeah, so me and a bunch of the folks that I was hanging out with saw it. We took a bunch of pictures and then bombarded Brian with them.
Yep.
So it's definitely cool. I'm excited to see the Gen Con display. With the van inside. That's pretty cool. And then when you want attention, just go in the van and start honking the horn.
Yep, that's right.
Wait a minute. There isn't there a Vast Grimm playlist somewhere? Shop Spotify.
Somebody I think has made one, but we are going to have some other music in the not too distant future. So
Yeah,
there will be some official stuff soon.
I was gonna say, you could put some like let's put some speakers on there and start blasting it out.
Yep.
You must be the most obnoxious booth in all of Gen Con.
It might be the most visually obnoxious. Um, it's definitely going to be loud.
Nice. So, folks, as always, there are links in the description. Go check out the Kickstarter. Vast Grimm is a lot of fun. It's super easy to learn, very, very quick. You know, if you've already familiar with D20 games, it'll take you like 2 minutes to learn this game. Um, and you can just jump in and start playing. Final thoughts before we head on out?
Speaking of playing, if you want to go get a character, just go to the Vast Grimm website and click a button to generate a character. You'll have most of the rules already there.
Yeah, the random generator is a lot of fun. I spent way too many times clicking that button.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Well, thanks for being on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Until next time, folks, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.